What Hello is back. Welcome Wednesday. Today we'll be talking about that time you saw Mommy kissing Santa Claus underneath the Christmas tree, except now Mom is leaving Santa Claus because there's a different sort of clause, and that clause is how unions and regencies work in Project Caesar. Of course, there is some details. There is a little bit of, hey, we're sharing the same mom or dad, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, let's see what Johan has for us in terms of introductions and or secret messages. Welcome to another Tinto Talks, the Happy Wednesday. We love to see it. Happy Wednesday, as is capitalized, as is tradition, because it is in fact a holiday. Happy Wednesday. We don't see any cryptic capitalization at the front of the message, though, which leads me to believe that this might not be Johan, and the clue is the lack of capitalization in cryptic capitalization in the beginning of his, introduction, where we give some information about our entirely top secret game, Project Caesar, aka Project Teaser, but for those of you who know how to pronounce words, it's Project Tizar, and get some great feedback. You're doing great. Okay, this week we will be talking about how unions and regencies work in Project Tizar. Unions. A union is a type of treaty that happens when two or more countries happen to have the same ruler. It's a little awkward when that happens, some people call it cheating, other people call it the best way to expand in Europa Universalis 4, aka the vassal swarm, aka I did this through skill, not through birding repeatedly to get the personal union over to Spain and France at the start of the game as Austria. Or when their rulers have a royal marriage. This functions like a defensive alliance that they will come to each other's help automatically if they are attacked, but laws can be added to them to change how the union works. Interesting that there is a little bit of agency inside the union in that you can change laws as things go on. Let's read on. In some previous grand strategy games, which apparently we're not going to refer to specifically, we have done a union was a type of subject, but here they start as a common pact in the form of international organization, where both partners or more at first start at the same level. So this is probably a very key and important distinction here, in that you won't be able to abuse getting free subjects via personal union anymore. By the sounds of it, if it starts out as an equal type of pact, and really do love the pacts as a kind of organizational feature that we are seeing in the game. But if this is the case, then obviously you can't abuse it as much, especially if you start at the same level. But this also implies that, eventually you can start applying pressure, and perhaps this is if... Well, let's read on. A newly generated union only has the assured defense policy set up, and if you wish to keep the union stable and long-standing, you need to increase the union integration level by getting more and more centralizing policies. Okay, so this makes sense. So you're going to have to work for establishing the unions that are increasingly integrated, and of course, I think that this will be necessary if you want to create some of the, kind of unions that were created historically, like the Iberian wedding, where Castile, or if you're from Barcelona, Castile, united with Aragon in a diplomatic sort of way with the personal union, which I think is like the prototypical thing that people think about when they think about personal unions being integrated, and so there will be able to be some form of unification. The union integration level describes how centralized the union is through laws and policies. Every member who is present when a centralizing policy is implemented gets its level increased. When the final centralizing policy, all junior partners that have the same level as the union get unified by the senior partner. Unified is a nice euphemism for annexed. Unified. Members who join the union later need to catch up on their progress to be integrated via the parliament. We see the Muscovite Union, the Grand Prince Ivan. We're too cagey today to be trying to pronounce that name. Actually, Rurikovich? That one doesn't seem too bad. Okay, here we see the Muscovite Union is led by the Grand Prince Ivan. Members leave the union when they no longer have the same ruler. In order to unify the union, every member must have the same integration level as the senior partner. Members with a lower level must have their integration enforced via the parliament. So this means that we will be playing a parliamentary minigame of sorts, which is much more interesting than just birding every time a ruler dies. Bam, we got him. Except that you probably do that to get the union to begin with. But here we see 8 members. We see Novgorod, Muscovy, Novgorod, Gorodets. This, of course, is a little bit, of a throwback to the Tinto flavor of last Friday, which was for Novgorod, and we did hear about some of the economic and political systems. So if you wanted to check that out, you can. We definitely were completely bald in that video. The Muscovite Union starts at the start of the game with the opinion, states, stability, legitimacy, and integration level of each of the members on display. As the top, you can see the union-wide integration level is basically a counter for all the centralizing policies implemented. And so we see this as 0 currently, a very decentralized sort of union. Union Parliament, in order to implement the new laws for newcomers, man, we're just creating extra news in there. Fake news. It is fake news because we said new laws for newcomers. There's no new there. You will have to use the Union Parliament, which represents an assembly of the Union that calls in the ruling class estates of all members who have already established laws not implemented yet, who have the already established laws not implemented yet. Okay, so this is interesting. We're calling in a parliament of all of the... Am I reading this right? We're calling it a parliament of all the estates of all the countries. That seems wild as hell. Calling the parliament for a union works similar to how you call it a country level. However, the parliament issue is fixed for it. Differently for a country parliament. To pass the parliament to issue, you need to reach a minimum of 50% parliament support. And to get support for it, you have to bribe one of the 3 ruling estates of any of the countries in the union. This makes sense. How much support they give depends on their great power score compared to the total of all member states that are called in on the parliament. So you have to bribe the better states, or ostensibly you have to have a much bigger great power score. I do like this change, or the way that this is implemented, in the sense that if you are much smaller than the country you are unioning, you are going to have to bribe a lot of their states in order for them to be at all interested in any reduction of, or increasing of centralization of the union, which is going to be detracting directly from their power, right? Because if they're subservient to 2 lords, or 1 lord because it's a personal union, but they are less likely to want to give up control of their nation if they kind of already have their hooks in to like a new and foreign ruler. Right? Okay. In other words, in a union that has both France and Normandy in it, bribing France's estates has a significantly higher impact on the result of the parliament than bribing Normandy's estates. Unless Normandy's bigger, eh? So here we have the quadruple union. A King d'Anjou, Caroli. We see, do we see what level it's at? No, we don't. But we see the parliament that we are currently having. We see enforced law implementation, 0%. And we see that we can bribe, like, the nobility of Serbia here, which is either supporting or is 83% supportive either way. Or is that, yeah, and then they have 60% power. And so them having a lot of power means that bribing Serbia, just Serbia, might be enough to get it across the finish line. But maybe you need to also bribe Bosnia, son, and get them. But between the two, you should probably be able to have over 50% to support the reduction of autonomy here. And then we will be able to continue on. So let's continue. Here we have the parliamentary of the Hungarian Union with Croatia, which already has 2 centralizing policies implemented, and now has Serbia and Bosnia, son, as newcomers in the Union, with an integration level for each of them of 0. These members are sorted by potential parliament support. Okay, so does that mean that we also have to get support from Hungary, or our own nation, in this parliament as well, and they are unwilling to support? That's a little bit of an interesting one. That certainly would make sense, though. Maybe they don't want to be unified with the rest of Croatia. These are 3 potential bribes available for each partner, 1 per estate. Once selected, you have the choice of one of several parliamentary agendas for that state. Very cool. So you're bribing them with one of these things. You can bribe them with bribes. This is the preferred way of bribing people, where you will lose legitimacy, lose ducats, buckets of ducats, and they will gain the money. You can increase opinion, which this will not result in a lot. Well, we still lose legitimacy. Just kidding. What's the difference between a bribe and an increase of opinion? The answer is there isn't one. Both are doing the exact same thing, which we, of course, we didn't bribe him. We just increased his opinion of us. Shout out. We have lessee levy obligations. Okay. Well, I didn't know this was the same thing as well, but it is ostensibly. I think that these must be then placeholders, because oh wait, we see the little bit of an extra thing. So the bribe is always going to cost money, but since we can read, we see that nobility-controlled serfdom is granted here, and then here we get an increase of opinions, which seems really good, and then here we see reduced levy obligations for nobility here. I assume you just want to improve relations generally, and then shake up army academy. Serbia loses 5 army tradition, but maybe if you don't want them to fight back, this is actually good, especially if this lowers their great power score, because if it lowers their great power score by lowering their army tradition, then this makes it so that you would ostensibly be able to be less reliant on their vote in future upcoming parliaments. But okay, right now the bribe side effect is to reduce the legitimacy of your country and transfer gold to the target state, and the cost scales with integration levels. The member of the state is behind compared to the whole IO, and their great power score compared to the senior partner. I think that this is an excellent way to scale costs in regards to the relative power. There's a lot of things. So, like, it just should scale just generally with this sort of thing. Really small countries should have a really hard time trying to integrate really big countries via personal union. And then also, just costs in general should scale with the size of nations. Like in Victoria 3, one thing that's frustrating is you're integrating or annexing any single country leads to ticking negative relations score with all of your subjects, or ticking negative liberty desire score, and it's just an overwhelming score, and it doesn't matter how big the country you annexed was, or if their culture was remotely similar to yours. So if you're Spain and you annex Portugal because you hate forming Iberia, then what will happen is you will get this ticking negative relations, even if Portugal's very close to you, and you could even form a nation with them anyways. And then also, if you just annex like this tiny little subject country in like Montenegro or something as Austria, you get the exact same negative ticking relations as if you annexed, the Ottoman Empire, which seems a little bit like not the way things should work. And we see very consistently in Project Caesar a sort of scaling relative to sizes that is intuitive. And okay, it may not be the most nuanced sort of way of doing things, but if you're going to pick something, a blunt instrument, scaling based on size and something like great power score seems very reasonable. And it also interestingly gives you incentive to play for great power score more so than normal, which I think that a lot of countries were playing for great power score in some sort of abstract sense rather than playing for maxing out ducats or army size. They wanted to appear to be the biggest and baddest country rather than like actually like having the biggest economy or the biggest army in like a historic sense. Prestige and these types of scores are something that the player does not value, but a historic player or actor would have valued very much. And so pushing players to value these types of things through systems that are intelligible does seem like a good thing. Once a member's estate is bribed, the country vanishes from the list on the parliament. Unions laws. Let's dive into different union laws that a union could have. Laws of the personal union are separated into 2 categories: centralizing policies and generic policies. Starting with the latter, a smaller category, every personal union has the assured defense policy when created. It is possible to replace it with 2 alternatives if you wish to have your partners not be involved in your defensive wars. These options are, however, not very popular amongst the AI. Definitely makes sense. You don't want the AI to allow their junior partners to be beaten up. But here we see vote for possible offense. Interesting. So this will be pulling us into an offensive war. Must strive for conquest and growth of our own power. Each member may be allowed to call the other members in time of war. Members can be called into joint offensive wars if always. I do love the wording on that. It does delight. We have Bohemian Union, possible offenses enacted. It will cost some to enact it. Noble clergy and burghers of all opponents of the resolution lose 33% estate satisfaction, which makes sense. If they oppose it, they'll be less satisfied when you pass it. And you could start the law/debate, and it'll cost 5 medals and 5 crowns. I assume that's like prestige. I don't know what the medals would be, though, but maybe that's a parliamentary, like, resource of some kind. The offense counterpart only has one policy, though, which allows you to call in union partners to offensive wars as if they were allies. Makes sense. The first generic policy is the one about a union contribution. As you may have noticed, the aforementioned policies mention that a union needs a certain amount of gold. With the union contribution policy, the union treasury of the union will be established where each member has to pay in. Very, very cool if each member is paying in. And then... Oh, that's so cool. So even if you're leading the union, you have to pay in, and then maybe you can use this money to do bribes, which is our favorite. Every month, the following transactions are made. Goes to the 100% of the proportion goes to the Bohemian Union. I do like that this, as the fact that they have this mechanic here, allows it so that if you were to have a leading partner and you wanted to have a certain sort of dynamic where part of the payers pay up to a specific country rather than the union itself. This seems to allow it based on them differentiating and having a proportion that is going to the union. So in theory, maybe if you pass some laws, 50% goes to the union, but 50% goes to Bohemia. And in terms of payers, we have a 69 nice coming from Bohemia, 69% of the money, and then 30% coming from Luxembourg, but 0.05 payments, which... Yeah, if you multiply a nickel by a nickel, you get a quarter, right? Shout out to Terrence Howard, except not really. The numbers of the actual payments are still subject to change. The gold in the Union Treasury is now used to enact policies in the Union or to call in the Parliament. Moving on to the centralization policy, the first and most important one is the policy of establishing de facto senior partner of the Union. This makes sense, and you definitely want to be the de facto senior partner. Very cool that it starts out where no one is the partner. The senior partner is the de facto leader of the personal union, so the parliament is called by it, and it's also the member that can propose centralizing policies. The AI member with the highest great power score will try and enact this policy. This makes sense, and they will have the greatest means to enact this policy because it passes based on proportion of great power score amongst union members. This definitely makes sense. The remaining policies, and this also makes it so that if you try and personal union someone bigger than you, maybe they become... you can't stop them from becoming a senior partner, and they will reverse it on you. The remaining policies revolve around standardizing the succession law, the government reforms and laws, the state privileges, the cultures and language of members, partners, and of the members after the senior partner one. Finally, there's a unification of crowns policy, which finalizes the centralization and lets the senior partner annex every junior partner who has the same integration level as the union itself. Makes sense. We also have regencies. The regency occurs when the government has no legitimate ruler and is instead led by a regent. Usually, it is caused when the heir produces no valid, or when the heir selection produces no valid heir, or when the heir is a mere child. We do hate it when that happens. In a monarchy, the consort may become the regent, but otherwise, it is a character associated with the most powerful estate, or even their overlord. Very cool. The estate seizes the reins. The regency persists until a proper ruler is restored. The type of regency you get depends on several different factors. but the game goes in order listed below and picks the first valid one for a monarchy. Okay, nice that they're in order. Noble Regency. If the noble's estate is more than 33% of power, a character from the noble's estate will be assigned as regent. This makes the nobles happier, but makes the other estates less happy. This makes sense. Clergy Regency. I imagine this is the exact same wording, so we're not going to read through it again, but clergy will be the next down the road. After this will be the burghers, then will be the peasants, and then will be an overlord regency. When a country is a subject and has no ruler, the overlord's ruler may instead rule as its regent. The subject, of course, will get a loyalty boost as long as the overlord's ruler is controlling it. This makes sense, but we do assume that they have to somehow fail to have more than a third power regency in all of their estates, which of course is possible because if you have 4 estates, you can of course have less than a third power, but that's probably pretty difficult to run into. We see consort regency. When the ruler of monarchy dies out or the heir is still a child, the consort may rule the country instead of regent. This makes stability go up a bit during regency. Weird, in my opinion, it's a little bit weird to see this so low. I would expect that to be ahead of some of the estates, but okay. We see a subject regency. Yikes. When a country is an overlord and has no ruler, a powerful subject may instead rule as its regent. All subjects will be slightly less loyal, though. That's interesting. We see interregnum, which is actually a cool word in terms of how it appears and how it phonetically kind of rolls off the tongue, but also refers to this regency happens when a country has no ruler. A temporary provisional government administration will lead it until an official ruler gets appointed, which can be a quick or take a long time. This, of course, what comes to mind here is the Polish-Lithuanian union and the fact that they had this voting sort of system, and they would vote for rulers, and we see the interregnum event would fire several times over the course of the game in Europa Universalis 4, aka the pre-project teaser, project teaser. The teaser of the teaser. Next up is election administration. When a republic has no ruler, a temporary one is assigned to rule as its regent until an official election can be held. This makes sense. We also have unique regencies like judicial conclave, Medlic succession, papal conclave, fratricide succession. Bro, get it? Which we will go into in more detail in relevant Tinto flavor talks. That's flavor with a U because, well, it's because they use the British spelling, but we like to pretend that they use the English spelling, or sorry, not the English spelling. We like to pretend that they use the American spelling because we're American, but that this is the one exception because by adding a U, you add more flavor and you add more hair. Shout out. Extend regency. If you feel that your heir is too competent or your hair, you and your current regent is really great, you can extend the regency by 5 more years for a mere cost of 20 legitimacy. Interesting. You just keep extending that legitimacy. There's always a chance, though, that a regent has had enough and attempts to seize power. Would that be so bad if they were way better? We see consort regency is giving more stability investment, but negative counter-espionage. But okay. Next week, we'll get a little bit, we'll talk about diseases. Yikes. That's no good. But that is the dev diary for today, and by dev diary I mean Tinto Talk. In my Tinto Talk I mean the discussion that's very secret about the very secret upcoming game that is super entirely top secret project teaser. But there we have it. We talked about regencies. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You know, do the YouTube algorithm thing. And other than that, have a happy Wednesday.